There was something in my shower with me every morning. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where we tell scary stories. And this is one from a Reddit user. I just started college. Boom. I moved into my dorm and I met my roommate. When I opened the door, he was standing there with his back to me, leaning against the glass wall of the shower, singing along to some music that was coming from the shower speaker. We hung out all night, played some video games and stayed up talking. I didn't want to wake my roommate, so I decided to sneak in the shower instead of getting up and turning on the lights and making noise. We talked and laughed, catching up on each other's lives. It read, "I've been watching you since you got here." He seemed genuinely concerned and suggested that maybe it was a group of older kids messing around. I thought it was a good theory, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That evening, I didn't go out with my friends. Instead, I stayed in my room writing an essay. About halfway through my paper, I heard footsteps near my door. I froze and listened intently. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Then I heard a knock. I slowly approached the door and peered through the peephole. No one was there. Had my imagination gotten the better of me? Was I really hearing things? Or was this all part of whatever sick game was being played? Still, I didn't want to risk opening the door and finding out, so I simply ignored it and returned to my essay. I started to feel uneasy, but I pushed it aside and went to sleep. The next morning, I went to the bathroom. I jumped and pressed my ear against the door, trying to listen for any sounds on the other side. I could hear someone on the other side moving around, talking in hushed voices. I couldn't make out their words, but I could sense their closeness. Suddenly, the doorknob started to turn. I stumbled back in surprise as the door slowly creaked open. I screamed and fell backwards onto my bed. The door swung open, and a dark figure stood silhouetted against the hallway light. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, only silence. The figure remained motionless on my threshold, its face obscured by the darkness. After a moment, it took a step forward, then another. It came closer, its eyes gleaming like twin points of light in the gloom. I tried to make myself small, hoping that if I wasn't seen, I wouldn't be hurt. But as the figure drew nearer, I knew that my hopes were futile. It was too late. Whatever lurked in the shadows had found me. I could have sworn I heard someone else in there. I stopped dead in my tracks and listened intently. All I heard was the faint sound of water running from the shower. I opened the door to the shower room and stepped inside. No one was there. I had checked under the stall to make sure no one was hiding and waiting to jump out and scare me. Relief washed over me when I saw nothing. I turned on the shower and began washing my hair when I noticed a pair of eyes staring at me from the corner of the shower stall. I turned around and saw nothing but a dark, dank corner. I shook my head and continued washing my hair. Then I felt a cold, slimy hand on my shoulder. I screamed at the top of my lungs and jumped out of the shower. I turned around to see if whatever was in the shower was still there, but there was nothing. I stood there frozen, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were filled with lead. I couldn't move. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. I needed to get a hold of myself. Whatever was in that shower was gone now, and there was nothing I could do about it. I dried myself off, put on some clothes, and headed to class. We decided to go to a nearby bar after dinner. We sat down, ordered drinks, and started to play some pool. About half an hour later, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out from my pocket and found another note. This one read, "Your breath smells like chlorine." I showed the note to my friends. They laughed and told me to ignore it. Maybe it was some kid messing around, trying to scare you. "Yeah," I said. "But how did he know what I did this morning?" Pool. We kept playing pool, drinking, and talking. I forgot all about the note until we got back to the dorm. Bye. I got dressed, grabbed my books, and headed to class. Later that day, I came home and found a note slid under our door. It read, "I know what you did this morning." Confused, I turned it over. On the back, it said, "Don't try to hide it." Bah. I immediately assumed that my roommate wrote this, and that he was messing with me. I shrugged it off and went to my room. I didn't get back to the dorm until well after midnight. My roommate was asleep when I got back. I quietly changed into my pajamas and got into bed, trying my best not to wake him. I don't remember what I dreamt about, but I had a strange feeling that I was being watched the entire time. As I walked in, he turned around and gave me a big smile, revealing a mouth full of misaligned teeth. It was a little unnerving. I quickly sat down on the toilet and tried to ignore him as he continued to sing at the top of his lungs. A few minutes later, he walks past me without a word and heads out of the bathroom. I finished up and headed to class. He seemed nice enough, a little weird but harmless. We got along okay. There were a few weird things here and there. He left his door wide open when he showered, which made me uncomfortable. But I didn't want to bring up such a trivial matter and ruin our budding friendship. So I just never said anything about it. One morning I went to use the bathroom while my roommate was taking a shower. That afternoon I get back to the dorm, unpack my stuff, change into some more comfortable clothes, and head out again, this time to meet my new friends from class. The next morning I woke up early for class. Later that evening, my friends and I went out for dinner. That night, before going to sleep, I looked under the door to find another note. Later that day, I brought the issue up with my roommate. And then the knocking started again, louder this time. This happened recently. I was at my home sleeping in my bed and I heard someone whisper my name. Now, this isn't creepy yet. My name is somewhat common, so it's not strange for me to hear it in passing or when I'm watching TV. We all decided to move in together after graduation because why the hell not? Jake was sprawled out on the couch watching Star Wars Weekend like the dirty animal he is. So I could occasionally hear him shout at the screen or laugh at some of the really bad jokes. And then I heard it. Someone whispered my name. Bye. I jumped out of bed and stared at the doorway for a moment, listening intently. After about half an hour, I finally convinced myself that it was safe to check the cameras. Our house is fully equipped with a state-of-the-art security system that monitors all the rooms. I'd never had cause to use it until now. Of course, I didn't hear anything else. I thought about getting up and checking the security cameras. When my mom died last year, she left me her house. It's a giant mansion on the outskirts of town. I have a notification set up to send me a text if the feed detects any movement. If the hacker wanted to watch the feed, they'd have to wait until I got the notification and then click on the link in the message to be taken to the live feed. Once there, they can only watch. They can't talk to any of the cameras or control them. I've never had any problems with it until now. It was driving me insane. I packed up my things and drove to a hotel. The front door was closed and locked. As I turned to the window, I saw a dark figure standing on the grass, staring up at the house. I slammed the laptop shut and threw myself onto the bed. I tried calling my friends, but no one answered. All of them were out with their significant others, so I was stuck at the hotel alone. I've been busy remodeling it and haven't had a chance to change the Wi-Fi password. Because of this, the house is basically a hive of internet activity. Any random person can log into my router and see what's going on in my house. I know it's a ridiculous oversight on my part, but I honestly forgot about it. The camera feed from the hallway showed that no one was in the house. There was no sign of forced entry and no lights were on downstairs. Jake was still on the couch asleep. I breathed a sigh of relief. I know this is normally funny, but it was a day when I was at my lowest and I couldn't take it. I picked up my phone and screamed at the top of my lungs. The camera cut out and I never received a new notification. But ever since then, I've gotten notifications from every room in my house, almost every night. Whatever it was, it had to be outside the house. P's a huge troll and thinks it's hilarious to mess with me. Nothing happened. No one entered my room. And after the sun came up, I saw that the front door was closed. I chalked it up to a crazy coincidence and went about my morning. But I soon realized that he was unsmart enough to figure out how to access the feed. And he certainly didn't know where I lived. He assured me that everything seemed fine and that I shouldn't worry about it. But I'm still worried. I don't feel comfortable living here anymore. I was stumped. I checked my Wi-Fi settings and saw that the hacker had changed the password. I changed it back, but I knew that whoever it was would simply change it again. I figured maybe some kids were playing outside and someone yelled my name. That sounded reasonable enough, but it was late and I didn't want to wake up Jake. No one had been in my room. I stared at the monitor in disbelief. All of them showed doors and windows that were either closed or locked. Then I noticed something weird. The footage from the kitchen showed the door open. I walked over to the kitchen and slowly opened the door. The pantry was empty, but I knew that wasn't the point. I distinctly heard someone walk into my room and whisper my name, yet the camera showed no one entering. The front door, the window, and the closet were all closed. And even if someone did enter through the closet, which leads to the attic, there was nowhere for them to hide. The attic door was locked and bolted shut from the other side. I had a feeling that it would be pretty hard to fit anyone up there. Plus, it was probably nothing. One of the other couples probably came back early and one of them must have said my name in passing. I checked my phone. It was well past midnight and my roommates weren't due back for another hour or two. But when I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, I began hearing strange noises. At first it was nothing too concerning, just the wind outside, or some creaking floorboard. I went to sleep with the door open, which I do sometimes, and I always get spooked when I wake up from hearing some noise in the house, and the door is open and the covers are all bunched up at the foot of the bed. Sometimes, if Jake or one of our other roommates comes in my room to talk to me about something, they'll accidentally knock the covers off the bed while they're walking in. Me, on the other hand, I was exhausted from the week. So after finishing my homework, I headed off to bed. We got a huge old Victorian house with a sprawling lawn out back, and a front yard with a big oak tree. It's isolated, but not so far away from campus that we could only get there by bike within 5 minutes. And the house is cheap. The owner barely does any upkeep and doesn't charge us much rent as long as we keep the place habitable, which is pretty easy since it was already livable when we moved in, and it still is now. It does have some pretty dated wiring, and a lot of our stuff has to be plugged into extension cords that run through the halls, which is where the whispers happen. I just assumed that one of my roommates was messing around. They've done pranks like this before. It wasn't until later that day, after the cameras had recorded, that I realized what had happened. I live in a share house with 3 other dudes who I went to college with. It was a Sunday night, and most of my roommates were out with their significant others. So it was just me and my friend Jake in the house. Our bedrooms are in different wings of the house, so it was unlikely that I would have heard him anyway. But Jake likes to watch these movies out loud. It took a few hours, but eventually I drifted off to sleep. I tried to go back to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing at the foot of my bed whispering my name. I got up, walked over to the computer in the corner of the room, and clicked on the monitor. Then I checked the rest of the footage. It dawned on me that no one had been in my room, not one single person. I checked the other cameras. I continued watching the footage. Now, people can watch the cameras whenever they want, but they can't interact with them. The same day that my mum died, I got a notification that someone was watching my front door camera. At first, I thought it was my little brother. I was scared to go to my room alone, so I stayed in the kitchen watching the monitors all night. After lunch, I called my internet provider and they sent someone out to upgrade my router and check for vulnerabilities. And last night, after the guy left, I started hearing whispers again. As soon as I settled into the room, I pulled up the live feed from my house on my laptop. I watched each of the rooms individually. It's just a horror movie. I told myself, it's just a horror movie. It's just a horror movie. I had made it to my room, okay, and started unpacking when I noticed something weird. At first I thought maybe this was where some pipes ran through the wall to make the wallpaper pattern line up perfectly. It was one of the worst days of my life. My dad died suddenly of a heart attack. I knew it was a good decision because it gave me a chance to start over somewhere new. The apartment was in a quiet neighborhood and seemed perfect for me. I went inside and started unpacking when I noticed something weird, a small hole in the wall, about the size of my hand. At first I thought maybe this was where some pipes ran through the wall to make the wallpaper pattern line up perfectly. Then I saw that the hole extended all the way through the wall and had been filled with insulation. And as I stared at it, my mind began to race, trying to figure out how I might have ended up in this insane situation. I considered calling my landlord, but I didn't want to bother her. She was an elderly lady who lived across the street, and I didn't want to wake her up. So I decided to ignore the hole and get on with my day. Place was cozy, and it had a big backyard. As I flipped through them, I saw photos of the previous tenants who had lived in the apartment. I looked at the closet and saw a brown leather jacket hanging inside. I quickly pulled it open and took it out. The moment that I touched the jacket, though I regretted it, it smelled like mildew and decay. I threw it back into the closet and slammed the door shut. That's when I heard it. A voice inside my head that whispered, "It's too late now. But why don't we fix that?" I screamed and fell to the ground. What was happening? Was I losing my mind? I tried to calm myself down and told myself that it was just a dream. But as I got up to go to the bathroom and splashed water on my face, I saw it. My reflection in the mirror had changed. It was no longer my face staring back at me, but the face of the woman from the photo. Her eyes were dark and soulless, and she was smiling. A wide, grotesque smile that revealed teeth that were far too sharp for a human mouth. I screamed again and fell to the ground, but no sound came out. Instead, a voice inside my head whispered, "There is no escape now. You are mine." I struggled to get up, but I felt a sharp pain in my chest and collapsed. I tried to breathe, but it felt like my lungs had been filled with ice. And as I lay there on the floor, I heard the voice whisper in my ear, "Welcome home." Most of them were young couples, and they all looked happy, but there was one couple whose eyes looked dark and evil. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling that came over me and continued going through the photos. But the more I looked, the more disturbed I became. Every photo seemed to have the same couple in it, but they were always in a different place and doing something different. I saw them standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, walking on a beach, and even swimming in a pool. But it wasn't the places that made me uneasy. It was their faces. Their eyes seemed to follow me around the room, no matter where I went. I tried to distract myself by getting back to work, but it was no use. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I moved in, I unpacked all of my stuff and sat down to watch TV. About half an hour later, I heard what sounded like screams in the backyard. Of course, I was freaked out, sitting there alone in a new place, when I suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream. I told myself that it was probably just a bunch of teenagers out for a night of fun. Still, I didn't feel like going out there to investigate. I stayed inside, locked the doors, and watched TV until I heard a loud bang on the door. I jumped and went to hide behind the couch. Whoever it was kept knocking and yelling, "Hello, is anybody home? I just want to check if everything's okay." I was shaking. I think I may have even been crying a little bit, but I didn't answer the door. I kept waiting for whoever it was to go away, but they never did. They just kept knocking and knocking and knocking. Then suddenly the lights turned on. He was only 50 years old, and I had just talked to him 2 hours before it happened. Maybe it was just my imagination, I thought. So I opened the door and stepped outside. That's when I saw it. There was a large gash in the door, and what looked like blood all over the floor. "Of course," I screamed. I don't remember what happened after that. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, I was sitting on the couch with my neighbor kneeling beside me asking if I was okay. I explained what had happened, and she just shook her head and told me not to worry about it. She said she'd go check outside. When she returned, she told me that there was nothing out there and that I was probably just having a nightmare. I believed her, but I still wasn't comfortable staying in the apartment. So I packed up my things and went to stay at a hotel nearby. After I hung up the phone, he called me back to ask me to pick up some things from the pharmacy on my way home from work. But instead, when I got off the train, I saw a swarm of police cars outside my house and a cop standing on our lawn. I felt sick to my stomach, but I tried to push past the dread that came over me. I walked up to the cop and asked what was going on. And that's when I heard the words that would change my life forever. Your father is gone. I was sent into a shock-like state for the next few weeks after that. My mum and I didn't talk much. We both retreated into our rooms and shut everyone out. She spent most of her time on the phone, and whenever I heard her side of the conversations, I could tell she was talking to someone about my dad's death. One night I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. As I did, I looked at the calendar hanging on the fridge, and I realized that I had eaten anything in 2 days, and that I had brushed my teeth, washed my hair, or changed my clothes since my dad died. I was in shock and didn't realize it. I needed to get my life back on track. So I did the only thing I could think of to honor my dad's memory. I started working on his estate and sorting through his belongings. That meant going through every nook and cranny of his study. I read through hundreds of letters and even found a shoebox full of photos. It was hard, but at least it kept me busy. A few weeks passed, and I still hadn't left the house. I was finally starting to feel like myself again, but I still couldn't bring myself to go back to my job as a hairdresser. It was just too much to handle after my dad's passing, and that's when I decided to take a break and move to another city. But then I saw that the hole extended all the way through the wall and had been filled with insulation. And as I stared at it, my mind began to race, thinking of how I might have ended up in this insane situation. I am here to tell you the story of how I found those tapes. I found a cute little apartment that was being rented by a nice older woman who understood my situation. When I realized that the knocking had stopped, I cautiously went to the peephole and saw no one there. The next morning, I woke up early and drove back to the apartment. Later that evening, I was unpacking boxes when I found some old photo albums in the back of one. And that's when I saw it. In almost every photo, the man was wearing the same brown leather jacket.